Look, the biggest lie in the business world is that hustle is the only path to fortune. You see people these days bragging about their 18-hour work days, and they wear their exhaustion like some sort of badge of honor. But let's look at the cold, hard math. If that hard work alone made you wealthy, every single construction owner and nurse would be retired on a private island by now. The truth is much simpler. If you can't walk away from your company for 30 days without the whole thing falling apart, you don't own a business. You have a high-stress job where you're the most overworked employee, and you're trapped in this cycle of manual labor. But this is fundamental logic, and it separates the person making $20 an hour from the person grossing 50 million. Most of you are stuck in this owner trap. You think you're a hero by jumping in, fix every single mistake. In reality, you're the roadblock. You're reacting to fires instead of building a fireproof building. You're the reason the company can't grow, because every single decision now has to pass through your desk, and you've made yourself the single point of failure. Think about the most successful professionals out there. You know, doctors, dentists. These are brilliant people who have mastered their craft, and they spent a decade in school mastering their skills. Now, what they typically start to do is they start their own clinic because they want that freedom of ownership. They want to multiply their income and build an empire, but they fall into what I call an expert's trap. And what that is if that dentist isn't standing over a patient with a drill in his hand and he's personally doing the work himself, that business stops making money. Now remember, they became doctors for the love of the craft, but they also decided they want to become business owners for this empire. Now you can't have both, because if you're the only one doing the work, you become so busy doing the medical work, you have zero time to actually be the business owner. And now they have to feel like they have to oversee every single filling because they're the best at it. And by doing it themselves, they're killing their ability to expand. And in order for them to grow to 5 or 10, even just a second location, that doctor has to accept a simple truth, that a systems-driven 80% result from an employee is better than a 100% result that requires 100% of that owner's time. You have to move from being the person doing the work to being the person who builds the machine. So to go about doing this, we got to introduce the documentation phase. How do we actually start building that money-making machine? Most people think documentation is just a boring paperwork. It's actually a map that you create, and you create it so clear that even a teenager could read it and could run that part of your business without asking you a single question. Now, if you can't make a process teenager proof, you don't have a system. You have a secret that only you know, and again, that secret is keeping you broke. We want to take the magic out of what you do and turn it into a predictable result. When a process relies on your gut feeling, it's impossible to scale. But if it's on paper and it relies on a checklist of sorts, it can be replicated 1,000 times over. So recording is very important in this formation. And we have a basic 3-step recording process. First, we got to capture you doing the task and the proper procedures and process. Don't sit down and try to write a manual from memory. Use a screen recorder or a camera and record yourself doing the exact task, doing it exactly the way you always do it. But talk through what you're thinking. So if you're an accountant reviewing a tax return, don't just check a box. Actually say, I'm checking this box because if this deduction looks too high relative to their income, the IRS might flag it for an audit. Now, you're explaining the why behind your eyes. Second part of this recording process is the transcription. Now, you don't write the manual yourself. Send that video to an assistant or some freelancer, and their job is to turn your spoken words into a step 1, step 2, and step 3 checklist. This ensures the manual is written in a way that makes sense to someone who isn't an expert like you. The third part of this is the feedback loop. Give that checklist to a new person and watch them do the task themselves. Don't help them in any sort of way, but if they get stuck, just remember it's not their fault. It's a hole in your document. You got to fix the document and not the person. This is how you ensure the process actually works without you ever being in the room. Now, this turns your internal knowledge into a permanent asset for the company because it removes the risk of you being the only one who knows how to do everything. And it allows you to step away because the brain of the business now lives on a piece of paper. So let's take a look at how this logic applies to different industries and different business models. Whether you're moving boxes, maybe selling advice as a consultant, fixing houses, the math remains the same. The first business model we'll get into is an auto repair shop. Think about a professional repair shop. A standard job like a brake service is where most owners lose money because they're inconsistent. The manual worker relies on his own skill, but remember, he's human. He gets tired and he sometimes misses a step. But a strategic owner implements a standard sequence, and it ensures that every car is treated with the same level of care regardless of who's working that wrench. It might include a simple step like clean the mounting surface until it's perfectly smooth. Why? Because even a tiny bit of dirt can cause a vibration, which leads to an angry customer coming back for a free repair. And by documenting this simple check, the owner can hire a technician to do the work to a guaranteed standard. And now it ensures safety, reliability, without the owner ever touching a tool. And now the owner is no longer selling his own labor, but he's selling a guaranteed result. This frees him to focus on getting more customers instead of fixing mistakes in the shop. Business model number 2 is real estate. We'll go over specifically renting out a duplex. Now, scaling real estate isn't about finding houses. It's about managing people. And you can't manage 50 units by yourself without losing your mind. You need a system for handling tenants. One of the greatest tools to do this is using an automated tenant system. So in the system, we have lead filtration. And how this works is that an automated form is sent to every person who asks about the apartment, and it asks for proof of income and move-in dates. If they don't meet that criteria, the system sends a polite no automatically. Now this saves you 10 hours of phone calls per week with people who are never going to qualify anyways. The next part of this tool is using self-guided tours. Smart locks allow vetted applicants to view the property using just a simple code. Now you aren't driving across town to show a house to someone who might not even show up. Then we use digital execution. Now lease agreements can be sent online, and the system won't let them sign it without attaching insurance. And finally, we have financial automation. Nowadays, rent can be collected through some sort of portal like Zillow, and the system can even send the reminders and late fees automatically if they haven't paid yet. You've removed the emotional stress of being a landlord, and now you're not chasing people for money. You have a great system now that does all the hard work for you. This allows you to scale from 2 units to 20 without ever increasing your workload. Now you get to move from being a landlord to an asset manager. Now let's jump into drop shipping or online sales. This is my favorite type of business because it's really easy to scale and grow, but online stores are often a busy work trap. Owners spend a lot of their days answering "where's my order" kind of emails instead of finding new products to sell. And we combat this by setting up a support filter. These days, you can implement a virtual assistant using a playbook to categorize every single email. So even if it's a tracking request, they use a basic default template to send to the customer. And if it's an email about a refund, that virtual assistant has to use a decision tree to see if that customer even qualifies. We also use Ad Monitor. And how that works is you set up automated rules in your ad platform. So if an ad costs too much to get a sale, the system turns it off. But if it's performing well, the system increases the budget. And now you're letting the computer do the babysitting for you. This allows the fulfillment to happen between systems without you ever touching a keyboard. And you get to move from being the worker glued to a laptop to an owner who spends 1 hour a day checking a dashboard. Another great integration for this kind of a system that WooCommerce and Shopify has is communication between the customer and your supplier. Now, they're not actually talking to each other, but when a customer places an order on your site, it sends that order to your supplier, and your supplier can send the order straight to the customer without you ever having to have a physical warehouse to house all your products. And you're not stuck printing out every single order, packing it, creating the boxes, and going down to the UPS store yourself to send it off. And trust me when I say it's such a helpful tool to use. I've been able to downsize a lot on my costs and expenses, and it frees up literally 8 hours of my day every single day for the whole work week. Another very common business model is something called business consulting. And most consultants think they're being paid for their time, but that's actually the logic of a worker. An owner knows that they're being paid for a specific business transformation. But if you stay trapped in the trading hours for dollars, you'll never build your big elite firm. First, what we gotta do here is we gotta use a discovery audit. So instead of a free call with every lead, you use a standardized intake form. And this scorecard shows them exactly where they're losing money. And this makes it a little bit less salesy and easier for you to sell it to them, because when you finally talk to them, it doesn't feel like you're selling them anything, but you're just reviewing a report that proves that they need your help. The second part of this is using a package curriculum. You take the 80% of advice you give to every client and you record it. So instead of explaining how to read a balance sheet 10 times to 10 different clients, you have them watch the module first. Third part to scaling a consulting business is using some sort of group implementation. So you host office hour calls because everyone is basically following the same framework and their problems tend to all usually be the same. So when you answer a question for one person, you're teaching it to 20 people at once. And if you systematize a $2,000 package, so it only takes 2 hours of your time instead of 20, your rate just jumped from $100 to $1,000 per hour. And that's how you scale an elite firm. Now, the next business model we can scale is a trade service like HVAC. And in a service business, the owner is usually the one who can sell the big jobs or figure out all the hard problems. But that makes you the ultimate ultimate roadblock. We gotta use a standard diagnostic plan. With this plan, the technician has to follow a 5-step checklist for every house. It might look something like they take a photo of the unit, use a specific script to greet the customer, place some floor protectors, and this automatically builds immediate trust. Then the technician has to follow a flow chart for the diagnosis. If part A looks worn, then they gotta check part B. This ensures every technician finds the same problem and offers the same solution, regardless of their experience level. Now, every visit ends with a standardized offer for a maintenance plan. It isn't a high-pressure sales pitch, it's just the final step in the process. You can now hire for work ethic and train for expertise using just your manuals. And I hope a lot of this logic is making a lot of sense on why you would do it. Because if you spend 2 hours a day on admin work that you could pay someone $20 an hour to do so, yeah, you feel productive. But if those 2 hours could have been spent closing a $50,000 deal, you didn't just save $40. You lost $49,960. So you're actually paying a massive price to do low-level value work. And that math is undeniable, because if your time is worth $100 per hour and you spend it on a $12.50 task, you're destroying your wealth. Every hour you buy back is an hour you can reinvest into growth. This is the only way to compound your wealth and your freedom. Now, the problem with people in service businesses, they think they're special because they offer this custom-tailored solution. And they say every project is different, but that's the logic of a worker who just never will scale their business. If everything is custom, nothing is repeatable. Stop selling your hours and start selling a fixed result. When you package your services, your marketing becomes clearer and your work becomes easier because your team knows exactly what to do. And in turn, you're taking your expertise and turning it into a predictable product. And this allows you to charge based on the value of the result rather than the cost of time. It also creates a business you can sell. A business buyer doesn't want to buy your personal labor. They want to buy a machine that produces a specific result for a specific price. And I know what a lot of business owners are thinking. The biggest barrier to scaling is the fear that quality of your business will drop when you're not there. But if you're the only person who can solve a problem, again, you aren't really essential. You're the single point of failure. Because every time you solve a problem for your team, you're stealing their opportunity to grow, and you're sentencing yourself to a lifetime of babysitting. You need to manage people based on the standard of the result and their ability to follow the manuals you create. So if an employee comes to you with a question and you give them the answer, you just train them to be dependent on you. And you've added more to your own mental workload, which is the silent killer of productivity. It is the exhaustion of answering 1,000 tiny questions. Now, if you want to stop this, you got to enforce a simple rule. No one is allowed to bring you a problem unless they also bring the following. They need to define the problem and they must state the issue clearly. They got to clearly state it, like the automated notice for late payments didn't go out to 3 tenants today. Along with stating the problem, they also have to present 2 ways to fix it using the current manuals. So with these recommendations, they got to tell you which option they think is best, and most importantly, why. Because your job is not to fix the problem, your job is to check their logic. If the recommendation is 80% as good as yours, you say, go with it. Why? Because that 20% difference in quality is the price you got to pay for your freedom. When a manager feels the weight of a decision, they start acting like an owner. You can finally stop looking over your shoulder, because being a great leader means being comfortable with that 20% gap. As long as the result is good, the how matters much less than the who. If a mistake happens, you don't blame that person, you blame the process. And when you fix the manual instead of yelling at the person, you build a culture where people feel safe to grow. You aren't the person fixing that car anymore, you're the engineer improving the assembly line. Now, the ultimate goal of all this work is to build a business that you can eventually sell. A business that requires you to be there every single day is not an asset, it's a job. To know if you actually own a business or if the business owns you, you gotta take the 2-week vacation test. What would happen if you took a 2-week, no strings attached vacation away from your business right now? That means no phones, no emails, no checking in. If it stops or struggles, then you have a trap. But if it runs and thrives without you, you've built a successful enterprise ready to scale or be sold for millions. And when you sell, you aren't selling your labor. You're selling a machine that prints profit. If your business depends on you, it is worth much less. If it's run by systems, it's worth a fortune. Remember, you're selling playbooks and not the person. So building these systems is the only way that will give you your life back and make you a millionaire. And it creates this compounding effect. Just as money grows over time, systemization doubles your capacity without doubling your work. Don't spend another 30 years trapped in daily labor. Start today. Audit your week, write your first teenager-proof manual, and take your well-deserved 2-week vacation. And if that business thrives and survives, you have finally become a real owner. Remember, freedom isn't found in the grind. It's found in the system you create. So follow the math and build your empire. Build the system and start playing to win.